WNYC Studios is supported by Odoo. When you buy business software from lots of vendors, the costs add up and it gets complicated and confusing. Odoo solves this. It's a single company that sells a suite of enterprise apps that handles everything from accounting to inventory to sales. Odoo is all connected on a single platform in a simple and affordable way. You can save money without missing out on the features you need. Check out Odoo at odoo.com. That's odoo.com.
Brian Lehrer on WNYC. On our Tuesday shows, we like to bring the science on a topic in public health, often climate-related, often other health-related science. And here on the first day of the pledge drive, we're continuing to honor that commitment. Today, we go local with news that New York Governor Kathy Hochul is poised to conduct what's been called a significant rollback of New York's landmark 2019 climate law. The governor has reportedly spent months urging state lawmakers to scale back New York's climate mandate, some of the most ambitious in the country, which would have required the state to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030 and 85% by 2050. Now, the governor was once considered a major ally in the battle against climate change. She now says those climate goals would drive up energy costs too high for New Yorkers. If she sticks to the original timetable, we'll get specific about what she thinks would happen. So here is Governor Hochul speaking to reporters last week.
I'm demonstrating the hard leadership that this moment requires. I assure you it would have been far more easy for me to just say, well, that's the law. Can't do anything about it. Sorry, consumers across the state of New York and businesses. You got screwed. It's not your fault, but this is how it is.
Joining us now to break down the latest on this is Jon Campbell, Albany reporter for WNYC and Gothamist. Hey, John, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Brian, thank you for having me.
You write about how Governor Hochul's budget deal, which has still not been finalized, calls for scaling back the 2019 Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, as it was titled, in two key ways. First, the 2030 mandate is gone, right?
Yeah, that's right. So this is, there was a mandate set in that 2019 law that said New York State has to reduce its climate emissions, its greenhouse gas emissions, by 40% by 2030. And the idea being that they were trying to set a benchmark before the ultimate goal of an 85% reduction by 2050. Now, the governor's office they were supposed to set regulations in place to kind of meet that goal a couple years ago. They've delayed and delayed and delayed that. There was a lawsuit over it. Now the governor is stepping in and convincing the legislature to get rid of that 2030 mandate, which the state was not on track to hit, and replacing it with a 2040 mandate where you would have to reduce gas emissions by 60%. Now, we haven't seen any sort of language on that yet. There is some belief in the legislature that they'll also soften the language to make it less of a mandate and more of a target, so to speak, but we have not seen that language yet. But that's essentially the big part of that is getting rid of the 2030 mandate, putting in a 2040 mandate for a 60% cut.
So here's what the governor says is at stake for regular New Yorkers paying their bills. The governor keeps pointing to a NYSERDA memo, that's a state document, that projects huge cost increases, more than $2 a gallon more for gasoline, $4,100 a year for some upstate households. Environmentalists say those numbers are based on an extreme hypothetical. So what's the actual dispute here over those cost projections, and how much of it is about gasoline for the car as opposed to other things?
Well, so the dispute gets down to what's known as the Cap and Invest program. Now, the 2019 law said, okay, here are the mandates to cut emissions. Then it's up to state agencies to come up with regulations to actually hit those cuts. And the program that the Hochul administration was pursuing was called Cap and Invest. It would put a individual cap on individual polluters, businesses, power plants, et cetera, on how much they can emit, how much carbon they can emit. And if you go beyond that, you'd have to buy allowances from the state, and you'd pay money to the state, which then would use that for green energy projects. Some of that would be used to go back to utility ratepayers. There's all sorts of things that would fund in hopes of meeting these climate goals. The governor has delayed those regulations repeatedly to the point where she got sued and lost in court. And now we're here where they're actually going to push back the regulatory deadline to 2028 as part of this emerging agreement that everybody expects to be in a final budget deal. And so anyway, the NYSERDA memo was based on the Cap and Invest program, but what environmentalists are really angry about is it was based on a limitless cap and invest program, that there wouldn't be a cap on the allowances that businesses would have to pay. And that is what the Hochul administration used to say, hey, this would drive up costs by $2,500 a year for some utility ratepayers in New York City. It would increase gasoline by $2.33 by whatever the current price is at the time. It is based on that limitless cap and invest program, which was really never on the table.
Where does that lawsuit that you referred to stand? And if the budget deal goes through and, reduces the mandates, is the court case moot, or the other way around? If Hochul rolls back the climate goals, but the environmentalists win in court, then it doesn't matter what she does and the legislature does in the budget? Is it clear?
My understanding is it would essentially make that lawsuit moot. It is currently on appeal. There were arguments last month, I believe, but the Hochul administration lost round one of that lawsuit, and round two is yet to be decided. But if they pass this budget that includes this deal, it would push back the regulatory deadline to 2028. It would give the Hochul administration a range of options of different programs they could pick from, including Cap and Invest. That would be Cap and Invest. That would be one of the options. That would effectively moot the main point of the lawsuit, which was to force the Hochul administration to implement those regulations to meet the prior deadline.
Do environmentalists have an alternative accounting for what would happen to energy costs in the state of New York if the bill is allowed to stand as passed, or the law is allowed to stand as passed in 2019? If the governor is saying it's going to cost more than $2 additional per gallon of gasoline, and they say, no, that's not real, do they have alternative projections?
Well, there was a group, I can't remember which group, put out some sort of alternative projections a few months ago. But their main argument is that the cost of fossil fuels will be too much for New York as the entire world starts moving toward clean energy. And that the idea being that clean energy is not actually more expensive than fossil fuel burning and fossil fuel powered energy. So that's their main argument. They think, the other thing too is the governor has been clear that she does not believe that the 2019 law is currently driving higher prices. Her argument is, if you put that Cap and Invest program in now and in a way that would meet that 2030 goal, which the state, again, is not on track to meet, that it would the prices would be out of control for consumers as she's running for re-election on an affordability campaign.
And one of the more technical, if we can get a little bit into the weeds here, I think it's interesting, more technical but potentially most consequential changes is the shift in how New York counts its emissions from measuring what they call global warming potential over 20 years to measuring it over 100 years. Is this like refinancing your mortgage? What does that mean?
Yeah. And suddenly your monthly bill goes down. Yeah, it is kind of like that because so right now the state uses that 20-year global warming potential time frame. And basically what that means is you're looking at the impact of a gas's emissions over a 20-year period versus the other standard is 100 years. And that what the main difference there is that methane, which comes from burning natural gas, is a very, very potent gas in the short term. So it shows up more in that 20-year accounting than it does in the 100-year accounting. And New York burns a lot of natural gas. So by switching from a 20-year accounting to a 100-year accounting, it will instantly make it easier for New York State to meet those goals. In fact, there is suggestion from the State Energy Research Development Authority that the state would already be on track to meet that new 2040 goal of 60% cut just by switching this accounting method.
I should say this isn't the first time Governor Hochul has backed away from a major climate-related initiative and cited affordability. We'll remember that in June of 2024, she paused congestion pricing right before it was set to launch, also saying it would hurt working families. She then did reverse herself, and she let it go forward, but with a lower toll. And your latest piece in Gothamist walks us through a few similar examples. Is there a pattern here in how she approaches these decisions?
Well, the big pattern between now and that congestion pricing decision in 2024, we're right before an election. In that one, it was the congressional election, and there was a lot of concern that perhaps vulnerable congressional Democrats in the suburbs on Long Island and Westchester would be harmed by the congestion pricing toll going into effect at that time. So it was delayed until after the election and the toll was brought down from what it was supposed to be. This is similar in the sense that the governor is now up for re-election, and we have the midterm congressional elections as well. So, I think you can't ignore the fact that the governor's entire re-election campaign is based on this affordability message, and she's really selling this climate law rollback as an extension of that.
Do you have a head count in the legislature of any kind? Because they're all running for re-election too, right?
Yeah, and in terms of a head count, the closest thing we have is state Senate Democrats. There were quite a few of them, I believe about 30 of them, about two-thirds of Senate Democrats signed on to a letter saying they oppose these kinds of changes to the CLCPA, the 2019 climate law. But it's really easy to say that and a lot harder to kind of stand that ground when it is baked into a budget with 9 different budget bills, 10 different budget bills, one already passed, that ties all sorts of different things together. When this is enshrined into a bill, which it hasn't been yet, it'll be in a bill with dozens of other policy measures that make it really, really difficult to vote it down. Because if you vote no on the climate change, you can't just vote no on the climate change aspect. You have to vote no on the entire bill. And there's going to be 5, 6, 7 other things in there that you do not want to vote against. So it makes it really, really difficult to vote that down.
Your piece notes that business groups, this is no surprise, including the Business Council, the state's largest business lobby, support the changes. Listener asks in a text, isn't Hochul mostly trying to please businesses but claiming it's for consumers?
Well, it certainly pleases businesses. I mean, I can't get inside of her head in terms of what her actual rationale is. But business groups are very happy to see these changes. And also, some labor unions also were pushing for what they called reasonable changes to the climate law as well. So, it is, at the end of the day, environmentalists and climate activists, their lobbyists in the hall of the Capitol are very, very upset. You see them in the Capitol and they just look dour. And the business groups are pleased with these changes. That's just how it is.
I'll just say before you go, then, that when we originally scheduled this segment together, Jon, we thought the budget was going to be concluded by now, and you could tell us how this wound up. Because, of course, we've been covering this on this show. You've been covering it, on the station and on Gothamist for some time now, this desire by Hochul to roll back the 2019 carbon emissions or greenhouse gas emissions deadlines, especially the 2031. And, talks have been going on for so long. The budget was due April 1st. It's May the 12th. We thought this was going to be over by now. Is this a major sticking point Or is it really other things, but they really know what they're going to do about this?
It's a major, it had been a major sticking point. Now it is to a point where they know what they're going to do with it. This is one that is largely settled among the governor and legislative leaders at this point. One of the ways that they got legislative leaders on board, the governor's office, is by putting an extra $1 billion into what's known as the Sustainable Future Fund, which that's another fund that pays for all sorts of different green energy and efficiency and climate programs. So that's part of the way that the governor got the legislature on board. But there are other sticking points. This is no longer one of them. This was one, but they got over it.
Jon Campbell is our Albany reporter for WNYC and Gothamist. Thanks so much for coming on and explaining where this stands.
Thank you for having me, Brian.
WNYC's journalism and storytelling is heard by millions of passionate listeners. Sponsors of our programming gain our listeners' attention and their respect. Learn about how your organization can support WNYC and WNYC Studios at sponsorship.wnyc.org.